Yeah. Thank you for talking
Everybody stopped talking. It must mean it's my turn. I was trying to adjust this a little better so that when we film people, when we video people, and watch out, you might get video, by the way, then the microphone wouldn't be right here because we've been having a struggle with that. So we're trying a new way for the mic tonight. Welcome to Helicon West. It's nice to have you here. We have a really special guest, but I'm going to let Tim handle the special guest introduction. I just want to tell you that, Joseph, why don't you come up? I just want to tell you that this is Joseph Anderson, and he is our main partner here at the Logan Library, and he makes it possible for us to have this room and this sound system, and they are so welcoming and so good to us, so thank you, Joseph, and my friend. Maybe one of these nights we can entice him to read. That would be wonderful. So this is the new broadside. This is edition 39. And Ron Jensen is on this one, and he should come sauntering in at any moment. So I'll give him his when he comes in. Marianne Wigner is on this one, and she should be along pretty shortly. The artwork is by Grace Reiser. She's one of our tutors in the Writing Center. Let's see, and the artwork on this part, this is Grace Reiser's, and then this part is Justin, who is the partner to our Brian Cook, who creates these. And if you read something at Helicon West, you might be published on one of these famous broadsides. So just remember that. And you would submit your work if you want to be published to me. So now you see me, I'm Star, and you can see me after the event tonight if you think your work should be published, and I'll tell you where to send it. And now I want to introduce to you Tim Keller with League of Utah Writers. He's the past president. And by the way, the new president is going to be Amanda. Why don't you stand up or wave or something?
Wow.
Our League of Utah Writers partners. They're pretty cool. Oh, hi Ron, I've got one of these for you and I'll bring it back to you. Your poem is on it. So here's Tim Keller to introduce our special guest this evening.
I was going to thank Star for turning the microphone on. I had problems with that last time.
Yeah, just crank that handle and put it wherever it works.
Hopefully that'll be enough. Okay, I also want to thank Star for putting this together. She's been doing this for years now, and because of her, we have a place to come and read our stuff. So.
Yay.
It's an honor to introduce Eric tonight. He's our featured reader. Eric has been in our writing group, our local League of Utah Writers writing group for several years now. You know, he's published his first book, obviously, this last month, and you know, when you're in a group that's open to the public and whatnot, new people come in, and you can't help but kind of catch each other's eyes and say, what is this person? What does he write? What is he this, that, you know, the other thing? And, you know, case in point, you can tell a fantasy and sci-fi writer pretty fast. It's like, oh yeah, fantasy, sci-fi, those are the easy ones. I take it back. Those aren't the easy ones. Romance writers are the easy ones. They practically walk in with a candelabra. You know, Isaac walked in 3 years ago, and he said, oh yeah, he's a poet. It wasn't a hard thing to guess. And Diane was like, oh, grandma stories. We were wrong. Eric was inscrutable. You know, he just walked in, sat down, and we waited till it was his turn and asked what he writes, and he said action adventure. And we asked what his story was about. He goes, well, see, there's this guy, and he's riding along in the mountains of Wyoming, and he runs across some mafia people, and they have a confrontation. And we were like, okay. Not a lot of mafia people in Wyoming, but we're willing to give this a shot. And it was kind of fun because within a month or two, it was like story hour when Eric would get up to read his chapters, like, we can't wait till the next installment, and then the next installment is after that, and that sort of thing. And damn, but I've never seen anybody work harder than Eric to get published, and he's done it. And he's here to read from his book tonight. I'm going to read you a short bio for Eric, and I'm just going to go ahead and have him come on up. Eric Bishop is known to his friends and family as the author version of Clint Eastwood. That's true, by the way. As the owner of a successful marketing firm, Bishop spends most of his time on a Utah ranch writing with the music of his adolescence bouncing off the walls. When he's not writing, Bishop enjoys spending time with his wife, 4 lovely daughters, at his home in Nibley, Utah. Unlike his main character, Jim, Bishop hasn't had any run-ins with the mafia yet. Eric, come on up here.
It's a lot of fun to be here tonight. A few weeks before I was published, my publicist called me and told me that Publishers Weekly had requested a second copy of the Samaritan's pistol. And I says, does that mean they're going to pick it up and review it? And he says, we don't know. We've never had them request a second copy. And then he went on and he'd done a little bit of research, and he said it was really tough to have that happen. And I don't know that that's reflective of me or my story, but it's certainly a group honor coming from the Cache Valley League of Utah Writers, because when I came there, I literally did not know the difference between active and passive voice. And I rewrote the novel 8 full times over the course of about 3 years. And so it was kind of a group award, I think, to have Publishers Weekly say the kind of things that they did about my story and about, not directly, but about all of the people who helped me with it. So Diane, Tim, Isaac, and Aaron, Ellen, Amanda, am I missing anybody else here who's listened to me drone on and on? Thank you. So one thing I love about Helicon is there's no censorship. So as Tim said, the protagonist Jim bumps into the mafia in the woods, and we're going to start there. So 90 minutes into the hike, Larry was breathing in gasps. Marcus and Simon, both older and heavier, looked haggard, their clothes now sweat-soaked and dirty. Johnny hadn't spoken since leaving the parking lot. "We do him right here," Marcus wheezed, the tone serious but lacking in volume. From the small of his back, he pulled a pistol, pressing the barrel under Larry's throat. Soon as he talks, we're back to golf. "I'm down," Simon agreed, sweat dripping from his nose and chin. "We'd get rooms in town and take turns watching the trailhead for a month." The men lasted longer than Larry expected. Loose softball-sized rocks and gravel made the footing more like a dry riverbed than a trail as it zigzagged up the wooded mountain. "Don't you guys want to get him off the trail?" Johnny asked. "Kid's got a point," Simon shrugged. "Who's to see us?" Marcus asked, waving the revolver around like a half-eaten candy bar. It's not like rush hour around here, for Christ's sake." "Do I really need to be here?" Johnny asked. "You like Porsches for Christmas?" Marcus responded with his own question. Johnny nodded. "When a truckload of our cash goes bye-bye, we look till we find it." Simon eyed his nephew for a few seconds. "How do we know this guy stole it?" Johnny pointed at Larry. "And how do we know the accountant is even in Wyoming?" "Because we know." Simon's tone indicated the conversation was over. "See this through," Marcus encouraged. "We'll tell your old man you'd done good." Larry's strength dissipated, weakening his knees. Like soldiers who found God in their foxholes, his mind turned to his maker. "If God saves me, I'll live better. If not, I'll die brave." A warm wind caressed Larry's skin as nostrils took some of it in, but with it came the odor of pines and trail dust. A shove and he stumbled as Simon pushed him from the trail and then yanked on the leash. They walked him into a shallow ravine, startling a small bird into flight. Lodgepole pines and dumpster-sized granite boulders dotted the forest thickly enough that there wasn't a clear line of sight longer than 50 yards. They came into an aspen grove a few minutes later with a single pine tree close to the middle. After looking around in every direction, Simon picked up a limb and walked toward Larry, who stood a half-foot taller than his attacker. Simon swung the branch with both hands. It snapped into 3 pieces, ripping an agonizing shriek from Larry as it struck his knee. "Tea time," Marcus said. Larry fell, clumsy and twisting, the pain radiating all the way to his hip and toes. Simon grabbed an even larger limb, stepped over Larry and handed it to Johnny grabbed an even larger limb, stepped over Larry and handed it to Simon. Larry curled up in the fetal position, but with his hands bound behind his back, he couldn't protect his head. A shoe heel smashed Larry's lips into his teeth. Shapes and blurry images appeared through his left eye, as though he was underwater. "I'm not scared," he thought, and the warm wind returned. Marcus wound up, telegraphing a kick to the chest. Larry rolled into it, taking the blow with his shoulder. "Ready to talk?" Simon asked. Larry spat blood on the ground, his mouth refilled, and he spat again. A clump of grass prickled his cheek, so he lifted his head to better see his blurry attackers. "You pussies can't kick." "Talk," Johnny said. "Just tell them." Adrenaline fed the fire roaring in Larry's belly, removing some of the pain, but instead of spitting, he swallowed and the flames sputtered. Duke's the dog, love the dog, stood at point, studying a spot in the trail as Jim rounded the corner. A bark, not happy or angry, but intense, told Jim he was onto something. "What you got, boy?" Jim tied Sam and the first horse in the pack string to the limb of a deadfall tree, then walked up to the energized dog. Duke often alerted him to deer or elk tracks, and Jim paid attention. It helped create a working knowledge for later in the year when the big game hunters came visiting. Instead of animal prints, he found footprints. 4 sets of tracks, 2 of dress shoes and 2 of athletic, marked the trail. The tracks headed into the woods, but stopped, turning down a shallow gully. Someone's got sore feet, Jim thought, about 3 miles to the parking lot as he traced a dress shoe imprint with his fingertips. Curiosity insisted he investigate. Not wanting the dog to get too far ahead, Jim decided to take Sam. The slip-knotted lead rope undid easily from the tree and he swung into the saddle. "Let's take a look," he said, reining the horse to follow the tracks into the gully. 200 yards further, Jim came around a boulder at the edge of a clearing. 3 men stood there. 2 were dressed in knee-length shorts and golf shirts, and 1 looked like a skater. The 3 limbed over an enormous black man, bound and bloody. The 2 golfers carried handguns tucked in their shorts at the small of their backs. Jim's mind raced and his eyebrows dropped into a scowl. The victim's hands were fastened behind his back. The largest man was winding up with a club like a woodchopper splitting firewood. Duke's growl stopped him. "What the fuck?" the man said, spinning around. "Stop right there," Jim shouted. "Who the fuck are you?" "Step away," Jim ordered. The men didn't move. The man dropped his club. "We found him here." The tone was friendly. "Do you have a first aid kit?" "I said step away." The man responded after looking at his 2 companions. "I was offering him a stick to help him up." "With the club above your head?" The other man, the one on the side opposite the tattooed skater, spoke for the first time. "Only way this turns out good is if you turn around and forget this." At least they aren't bullshitting anymore, Jim thought. "What about him?" Jim nodded at the man on the ground. "What about it?" The tattooed young man puffed out his chest. "He'll be okay." Both golfers turned to look momentarily at the tattooed young man and thought as if he'd thrown ice water in their faces. His bloody clothes and messed up face don't say so. Jim's neck itched, but he refused to scratch. "He's fine, you fucking hick." The young man stepped forward. "Leave while we're in a good mood." "Every litter has a runt," Jim muttered to himself. "What did you say?" the young man demanded. Jim didn't respond, his eyes moving across the men's hands, making sure not to focus for too long on any one thing. "You have no idea what this is." The man used a combination of words Jim hadn't heard since boot camp. His tattoos are scarier than the language. Jim pressured his stirrups to make sure Sam would stand. Blood pulsed through his temples and eyelids. His nose twitched and adrenaline sped his heart to twice its normal speed. But Jim focused on his military training. Watch their hands, project strength, and if you're lucky, they'll back down. Under closed lips, Jim's jaw hung loose and he exhaled through his mouth. He decided against drawing his pistol, thinking it would make things worse. Duke growled, baring his teeth as his hackles rose, then lunged forward with a bark. "Call off the mutt," the tattooed young man yelled. The man on the left grabbed his pistol, but before he could take aim, Jim drew his own weapon and fired. The bullet tore through the man's heart. Duke charged. The 2 remaining men drew but paused, watching Duke leap on the falling body. Correcting, they brought their weapons to bear on Jim, but his second shot shattered the second golfer's skull. The tattooed runt shot in the same instant, missing Jim but hitting Sam high in the chest between the horse's front legs with a dull thud that vibrated up into the saddle. Another bullet whizzed over Jim's head as Sam staggered. Leaping from the horse and landing on his feet, Jim stepped toward the runt, who backed up with a fearful look. The young man shot from his heels, missed to the left. Jim shot, and the young man clutched his chest and fell sideways, his tattooed arms beneath his lifeless body. Jim stood for a moment. He exhaled and reholstered his pistol. Before dropping to his hands and knees, his stomach convulsed, and he vomited his scant breakfast into the dirt. Drunk with adrenaline, the earth reeling beneath him, Jim gritted his teeth, refusing to pass out. Thinking about Sam and Duke's barking, drowning out the ringing in his ears, he stood. Duke growled, holding between three bodies, his hackles still on alert. Sam lay on his side, head resting in the grass. The horse's great bellow lungs moved air through his nostrils, wiggling the stems, but as Jim sprinted towards him, it slowed. Sam was going to die. Tears sprang to Jim's eyes as he collapsed next to the horse. Duke nosed the horse's lip. After smelling his breath for several seconds, he whimpered. The scent of internal blood told him Sam would soon be gone, and he curled up next to the horse's neck. Jim sleeved away the tears and took aim at his dying friend. His fourth shot seemed louder than all the other three combined. Gun to his side, he wiped his eyes with his free thumb, the tears soaking into callous, dirty skin. He remembered sleeping in the barn to witness the birth. A perfect buckskin coat surprised him coming from a brown bay quarter-horse mare and a jet-black Arabian stud. Sam was the best horse Jim had trained, capable of running for miles, the gift of endurance from Arabian ancestors mixed with the pleasant disposition of a quarter-horse mother. 10 minutes ago, I was headed home, and now Sam and 3 men are dead? He wanted to wish away the reality, and yet the ugly truth surrounded him. Jim reholstered the pistol and stepped over Sam's neck. The fury growing in his stomach projected onto everything in view. He hawked, then spit some of the vomit residue from his mouth as he approached the man. "Thanks for helping me." The man mumbled through split lips. The words came out slowly, scarcely more than a whisper. "You saved my life." Jim untied the leash from the man's swollen hands and cut the zip ties. Returning to Sam's side, he yanked free the saddlebags from beneath the horse's body, where it came free in a tug-of-war lurch. From the bottom of the bags, he pulled out his first aid kit containing peroxide bandages, antibiotic ointment, and latex gloves. This next part I want to read is after Jim gets home and goes to bed. My favorite part of the novel. Larry's sobering words itched like a mosquito bite in Jim's head as he got ready for bed. Being on the run from the mafia would have seemed preposterous as he woke up on the horse blankets that morning. Now the prudent thing to do was to take Larry up on his offer, but the lack of alternatives angered him. The only other thing he could think of was to sit at home and wait for the hitmen to show up. Jim wanted to shoot them all, but he knew he was already lucky to be alive. He'd been stupid to get involved in the first place. These men had no scruples about torturing someone or killing in cold blood. As he replayed the scene in his mind, it was shocking how little regard they held for life. To them, killing Larry himself was no big deal, like making a phone call or using the restroom. Hollywood movies were literally Jim's only window into the world of organized crime, and probably not the most accurate window at that. He remembered watching The Godfather and Goodfellas and hated the characters. Bedazzled with jewelry and tailored suits, they seemed like overdressed clowns. Jim undressed, brushed his teeth, and tried to sleep, but he couldn't stop thinking about the day's events. They would find a way to kill him if he stayed on the ranch, and he doubted anyone from the community, other than Albert Johnson, the local sheriff, would help. Jim wasn't Mormon, but it was the predominant religion of the area. He'd lived among them all his life, except for his 4 years in the Army, and he'd always felt like an outsider. If someone was speaking at church and he wanted to hear, he would attend. He'd also go to some of the social functions where some well-meaning neighbors invariably tried to talk to him about his beliefs, and he would politely decline. Sally had invited him to listen to the church's missionaries after high school, but the spiritual awakening she prayed for never quite materialized. The Book of Mormon didn't accomplish what the missionaries promised it would, give him an overpowering spiritual witness of the faith's authenticity, and he'd read it twice. Deep inside, I'm a skeptic. He'd realized the fact about himself in high school. He'd gone to see a hypnotist with a few of his friends. The hypnotist had called several people up on stage and told them to extend their arms. They counted down from the number 10. With each descending number, their arms would feel twice as heavy. As it became unbearable, it would be okay to drop them. 10, 9, 8, 7. Strange music played in the background while they were told to breathe slowly, but nothing got heavier. If anything felt different, it was simply fatigue. Jim heard other people's arms slap their bodies. Because he was the only person with arms still extended, the hypnotist whispered in his ear, "This isn't working for you, is it?" "No." "What isn't working for me?" The hypnotist dismissed him to sit in the audience as 9 of his friends became mindless pawns, their dignity sacrificed for the performance. They danced like Michael Jackson, walked like ducks, and screamed for their favorite horse at a race. Feeling left out, Jim approached the hypnotist after the performance and asked why the spell hadn't worked. The explanation was unexpected. "You have a literal mind," the hypnotist had said. "Most people believe what they're told, but you don't. As I counted backwards, you checked to make sure your arms were the same. The difference between you and the others is you prove things to yourself first." Jim had wondered through the years what the hypnotist meant. It made him think about organized religion and the crazy things people did, drinking poison Kool-Aid, crusading to reclaim the Holy Land. And it wasn't just Christians. Muslims flew airplanes into buildings. What a bunch of stupid bastards believing whatever they're taught or told, Jim thought. Did the men who drew their guns on him today act on a belief system? When the Mormon missionary said he would feel all sorts of wonderful impressions, he waited, only to be disappointed. Maybe he was spiritually dead or inept, or maybe he wasn't as influenced by their power of suggestion. Their advice had been simple: pray more and pray harder. It seemed obvious then, and it had ever since, that what they meant was, trust us, your arms are getting heavier. They really are. Even if they don't feel different, they are. 20 years later, Jim knew the impression had shaped his life. At the same time, he discovered a connection in the poetic lyrics of a favorite song. "No, his mind is not for rent to any god or government." Rush's song resonated, speaking to his bone-deep pragmatism. I definitely need to dig through my old music stash. Jim switched gears and thought about the few spiritual impressions he had had. The closest thing to faith-promoting tingle came when he'd helped or received help from other people. The words of his favorite hymn, "A Poor Wayfaring Man of Grief," played through his head. He felt good knowing he'd saved Larry's life. Maybe the song had it right. "These deeds shall thy memorial be. Fear not, thou didst them unto me." The hymn was sung at Bradley's funeral after the Gulf War. Whatever God was, Jim hoped deeds done with a pistol might count. With the long day over and the adrenaline gone, he finally drifted off to sleep. He dreamt of riding through the mountains with Sam. Sam's thundering hoofs powered them across a meadow. The wind pushed across his face, tugging at his shirt and making his eyes water. They galloped into the woods, jumping over deadfall trunks, weaving around boulders at a reckless pace. Sam leapt into a stream and charged out of the woods through another meadow and around a sagebrush hill. Jim bent low, moving his weight over the horse's neck. His cowboy hat flew off in a gust, his string tugging at his neck, wagging like an out-of-control kite, caught in his tailwind. Together they ran for miles, pushing for something he couldn't quite recall, moving because they could, driven by instinct, heading wherever felt right. They came to the end of the world, a great precipice where birds flew beyond the edge, toward an eclipsed black sun, its light cast long shadows with rainbows trimming the edges as though viewed through a prism. Jim dismounted. "Thanks for the ride." I've lost a few horses. "Thanks for the ride." He wrapped his arms around the horse's steaming neck, feeling heat and perspiration stain his shirt. Sam's ears were strained forward. He stood gazing fixedly out into nothingness, perhaps hearing something meant only for the souls of horses. Sam bent down, looking at the abyss. Then a great snort and a stomping front hoof sent small rocks tumbling over the edge. Sam relaxed as Jim petted him. They stood for a long time, both confused by the edge of nothingness. Thank you. If anybody's interested, I know a lot of my friends have already bought books, but they're on sale. I'll sell them to you and sign them for $3 cheaper than you can buy them online. So, thank you.
Like I told you, it's story hour. It's awesome. Okay, I'm going to call people up in threes for the open mic portion of the evening. First person on the list is Isaac Tim. Second is Diane Hardy. And the third is Tyler Esper.
All right. Forward here. Yeah. Can you hear me? All right. Eric talked about the music of his childhood growing up. This is kind of right down that alley. Its title comes from the Guns N' Roses album Appetite for Destruction. The title of this poem is Air of Destruction. The building drumbeat of the 747 scream of Mr. Brownstone and his descent down the guitar half-pipe matches the V8 roar. Gasoline, cigarette smoke, and we scream motherfucker to the gods. Stuffed between a drunken cowboy and a girl from Ely, I take the bottle of wild turkey from my brother Ricky, who grins like a skull in the green light of the dashboard. As we tear out, spinning gravel like bullets against the side of the school, the stereo rolls over to Paradise City, and I roar in my head, I'm invincible, I am part of this. And I swallow my lie easier than whiskey. And the second one is, I have met some really great people from Idaho, including Star. And this is a story about the people that are here, the people that are gone. And the first one's about a young man named Dustin Birch, who baptized my wife in late 2000s and lost his life in the Gulf War. And I'm not really a religious person anymore, but every time I think of religion and belief, I think of this young man and his testimony. And 22 is really too young. So this poem is dedicated to Dustin. And it's called I Hear Idaho. I hear Idaho. Dustin. Sometimes I wake up on a Sunday morning and hear Idaho. Young men whispering reverently on their way to church. And I remember a fervent prayer. Okay, let me start again.
That was part of the poem.
Okay, I'm going to start from the beginning. Okay. I hear Idaho. Dustin. 1. Sometimes I wake up on a Sunday morning and hear Idaho. Young men whispering reverently as they pass my window on their way to church. And I remember a fervent prayer from a young man who places my wife under the water. The glowing nimbus of baptism. As he raises her, he grasps her hand, breaking the bonds of water, pulling her heavenward. 2. Jessica. I see her smile, that secret smile noted by Jane and Barry that hides a secret next to a woman's cheek when she finds a metaphor that amuses her. 2. Josh. I see his Idaho, the tripping meter that reads the sky, the notes in the prairie grass, the outbending curve of the Snake River that reflects hieroglyphic storm clouds. See him holding a young woman, explaining why the stars huddle in the cold galaxy as the car engine under them ticks its last heat into their bodies. 4. Star. Idaho dances across the quad on her laughter as she floats down the sidewalk like a leaf of dress and flowery wrap, approaching me and her steps slow as I approach, and she gives me her attention, gives me her attention as if I'd asked her to dance, and tells me it's a beautiful morning, and I believe at that moment she just made it so. Okay. table there. You don't want to do fun damage to the library. Sorry.
Take your time.
Not a grandmother story tonight, but close to it, a teacher story. I'm through with teaching, I thought, after retiring from the university. College kids are one thing, but I'm not about to go back to teaching piano in the living room with young children tracking in. 4 years later, I changed my mind, saw the field change with new methods, materials, music, and I wondered if I could still relate to kids. I'd try some new ideas and make the musical journey with them. So I began with Jocelyn, 7, and Kellen, 5, bright children eager to learn. It went well, particularly with Jocelyn. She'd readily talk about school, friends, and hobbies. Sometimes while I was teaching her brother, she'd draw me a picture of her cat or write me a letter to post on the fridge. Kellen was harder, aloof in his own world. When I asked how school was going, he answered fine, and I knew that was all I'd get. Once, trying to make conversation, I asked about his teacher, her name, what she looked like. He thought a moment and said, Mrs. Merkley, she's tall, has brown hair and glasses. Oh, I smiled. Do you think she's a grandmother? He shrugged. I don't know, she could be, because she's old like my mom. How can I bridge this generation gap, I wondered, thinking of his active, slender, 30-something mother. Month after month, Kellen did the required practice and showed as much progress as Jocelyn, but he remained distant and relieved when the lesson was over each week. Learning to play a musical instrument well is a long, ongoing process that competes with computer games, sports, and hanging with friends, all of which are more easily accessible. There has to be some joy along the way. If I don't find a breakthrough soon, I will lose Kellen, I thought, not realizing that a headway might come independent of music. Christmas came. I gave the kids a present as they put on coats and sat waiting for Dad to come. The gift was a red felt stocking with a Santa Claus on top. Inside were yummy chocolate-covered caramels. Jocelyn said, "Thank you, Dr. Hardy, the sock's cute, but I can't eat chocolate because I'm allergic to it." It's okay, though. My dad buys it from me. That's what he did at Halloween last year. Yeah, she made a lot of money, enough to buy a video of Despicable Me. I just ate all my candies, Kellen shrugged. How did you know you couldn't have chocolate, Jocelyn? I asked. When I ate some last Christmas, I broke out in hives, she said. Then she loaded up her books and went to the window to watch for her dad. Kellen, in the meantime, has sat deep in thought. He'd set the sock down, apparently not interested in it. Well, Jocelyn, I can't eat chocolate either. I break out in fat, I chuckled. Kellen erupted from the couch with loud laughter, sliding off and rolling on the floor doubled up. I stared at him horrified. "What's wrong, Kellen?" "He's just weird," Jocelyn snickered. Giving a loud snort of laughter, Kellen got up from the floor and ran to Jocelyn. "Did you hear that? Dr. Hardy can't eat chocolate because she breaks out in fat." "I heard, Kellen," Jocelyn whispered, reddening and studying the clock. Kellen's eyes locked with mine, and we laughed together, me modestly, and he exploding like a July 4th firework. Tears rolling off his face, he ran to me. You break out in fat, that's so cool." "Dad's here," said Jocelyn. "Get your books and let's go." Kellen pushed his sister out of the way and opened the door. "Dad!" he cried, still convulsing with laughter. "Dr. Hardy can't eat chocolate because she's allergic like Jocelyn, only she breaks out in fat." The father reddened, glanced at my big belly, and hurriedly looked away. "Come on, kids, we need to get going." Jocelyn quickly followed her dad out the door, but Kellen held back. Suddenly, he grabbed me around the leg, hugged hard, and then ran to catch up. They all piled into the car. Dad started it and began to back out the driveway. Kellen, still laughing, rolled down his window, waved and yelled, "You're funny, Dr. Hardy. See you after Christmas." Clearly, piano lessons are about more than music.
Tyler?
Hi, everybody. It's been a while.
Yeah.
I have three things that I want to share with you tonight. One of these is not something I wrote, but it's something that I wanted to share because I feel like it might not really be accessible to this audience. This is a hip-hop song by an artist called Aesop Rock, and it's called Ruby 81. July 4th, 1981, candles of a Roman ilk unloaded from a Chevy truck into the home her folks had built. Patio with charcoals, an extended fan and folding chairs, safely arced around the yard to focus on the smoking flares. Couple cousins, uncles, aunts, mostly grown-ups, couple brats. Baby Ruby's only 2, she's too close to the jumping jacks. I'm getting out of breath. She's too close to the jumping jacks. Mommy scoops her to the house, buckles up the booster seat, rolls her to the storm door, let her long for all the lunacy. Telephone distracting mom, Ruby wriggles outer strap, fingers pushed to plexiglass, she's off into the Sour Patch. Past the pyrotechnics, undetected and invisible, woke the sleeping beagle skipping toward the kidney swimming pool. Off into the yawning blue, the splash would mum the rocket ships. Ruby's lungs were filling by the time her kin were cognizant. Many sprung and sprinted down, all arrived belated, but the beast she had earlier stirred had been alert since waking up. Canine let his gainer fly, watertop commotion grow, howling guests assumed the cloven hooves had come to do-si-do. Frenzied and congested deck, parked to let the elders see, soggy beagle gently dragging Ruby in his yellow teeth, laid the tiny body in the sun before her father's feet. When she choked the liquid through her bluish lips, he dropped his knee, helped the air to reconvene, towel has shaken Ruby off, EMT confirmed the save, everybody say, good dog. And then I have 2 originals I'd like to share. This first one is called The New Paranoia, lowercase number 1. The new paranoia, dead end, 11 a.m. and the walls are crawling and there's hissing from the vents and footsteps and footsteps and footsteps. They're at my door, the doctors and the lawyers and the jugglers, face cards and homecoming queens peering around the curtains. The paint is peeling and the stairs are trying to eat me alive. The telephone is screaming in a broken gargled dial tone. And the neighbors are building something sinister. I hear it clanking from the boiler room, pounding the walls in the godless morning hours and the radiator hell growling. Pacing back and forth, chain smoke, cigarette, kitchen floor. 1 minute I'm lucid and the next I'm losing it. Their lidless eyes tilt side to side and I am never alone. And then this final one is called Crucified. In the morning, I wake up next to you and you sleepy ivory between bed sheets. I cold coffee, cigarette, and dance in your dreams. Let's take this tango to the mezzanine. We're bleeding. Darling, it's obscene to speak such secrets in stereo. The rain stopped pouring, so we listened to the radio, counting out the quarter notes to the heartbeat of a metronome. And oh, you are making me crazy, the way you stay in one place for days. The prophecy promised honesty, but honestly it's apology, like the Father to the Son and Holy Ghost. And most of the time I'm lost in orchards of endless apples and clapping hands and player pianos and marching bands. This is psychotic, colossal whirlwind bluebird logic, and we're co-pilots on stars and white roses. And we America so hopefully naked in the pine trees between Rocky Mountain cities and sunflower lucid dreams, screaming so joyfully through the daylight that nothing else makes sense, so why should I? Because the last guy to speak his mind lost his friends and got crucified. You might know him as Jesus Christ. But I guess what I'm saying is this rain begs baptism and you're there with thunder and tomato juice to watch me born again. I'll crawl through your window and into your bed, stopping by for a kiss and a cigarette, then 6 hours later I'm wondering where my morning went. Possessed by tourniquets and grinding up medicine, Fort Collins by summer, Boston cottages before we're old wrinkly cloth. Mothbite sweaters and dusty leather in this awful weather. Our clever endeavors to pick up feeble phoenix feathers floundered. Ecstatic addict panic in the bullfight lightning, spark arson frightening, our psychic alliance defines us. We are the defiant sirens. There will be no sinister visitors in our castle of sand on the tide-turning waves on the other side of the moon. Thank you.
Our next three readers are Ron Jensen, Brian Cook, and Amanda Lizader. Ron?
One woman. I know I have my weaknesses. I'm not a perfect man. I hope when you meet me, you take me as I am. I hope I can give you the love you deserve. I hope to be the husband you'd be glad to serve. Oh woman, wherever you are, I'm waiting to be your bright star. When she's unmarried, isn't quite complete. If I can put a pattern of David's nail feet. If I kiss anything, I kiss a nice girl. I'm straight to leather, like clear jewels. Oh woman, wherever you are, I'm waiting to be a bright star. I'm going to catch up going, that one moved away. I hope I'll let her go until our dying days. When this life was through, after all that we gave. Hope all that continues beyond every gaze. Woman, wherever you are, waiting to be a bright star. From work like the wind. I remember back in school when I thought your dad was like the wind. He was so fair. I thought your eyes were so beautiful. You were like the sun. I thought you'd be my gal. You'd be a lot of fun. Like the wind, you take me away from the growing up to the present day. Like the wind, I'll always be there, going up from year to year. And years went by, and you fell for me. When the time was right, I got down on one knee. Now we are married. After all this time, I thought I'd write a song saying, God, you're mine. Like the wind, you carried me away from the growing up to the present day. Like the wind, I'll always be there, going you up from year to year.
Hello, everyone. Hi. Yay. Good to see everyone. So, there are three of us in the fiction class, which is a little bit of a reason why we always show up a little late this semester, because conveniently, my creative writing class is on Thursday until 7 o'clock. So, we actually wrote some short fiction, and I think the others are going to share theirs as well. So it's been a lot of fun. I'm going to share mine. It's called Summer Light. You expected the explosion to be bigger. A cloud of dust lifted above an anthill shattered by a firecracker. Instead, the black cat snapped, dirt scattered. You ran from your shelter and saw the mound of stacked rocks, small as carrot seeds, around the careful insect hole. Nothing looked different. Nothing was disturbed. The backyard lit up with fireworks all through July. Red fountains spilling up towards stars, pinwheels twirling with sparks. Once, grass poking through cracks in the driveway lit fire, but you didn't worry. It would die out. Mother took you to the tent in Smith's parking lot. Not that one, she said. Too much. How about them spinners? Sure, they were fine. The big ones named Black Dragon and Volcanic Inferno looked beautiful, lined with pictures of skyward explosions consuming the sky. But the small ones were fine. When you got home, Dad fingered through the small tubes and packages. Looks like you got the best stuff, he said. Soon you'll have a brother to watch your shows. You grinned. One day near July's end, your mother cried more than she had ever cried. Dad's car bore her away, and for the first time, you found yourself alone. Night engulfed the sky, and you carried out your nightly ritual, climbing on the washing machine, grasping the cardboard shaft of an unwrapped fountain. Outside on the driveway, you lit the fuse and stood back on the browning grass, summer's victim. The fuse glowed, shrank, waited. Your parents must not have seen the small fuse as the car came up the driveway, crushing the tube under rubber. The blast of green crackled in arches across the grass, snapping, hissing from the fiery cylinder. Your mother, window down and all, screamed mid-sobs. All the place should have been ablaze, should have glowed with the licks of flame climbing dying blades, but no flames grew. All the same, as your tear-streaked mother scooped you up, you felt that something had burned down. Thank you.
Not far from where I live, they started building this road. It'll be a great road, they said. It'll take you where you want to go, they said. Day after day they were out there, men with hard hats, orange vests, excessive tans, standing, measuring, looking, holding signs, operating machines. Scrapers, sweepers, loaders, rollers, excavators, and graders, while the black smell of asphalt heated the air. And from beneath their smoking, tar-stinking machines, the road rolled out, each day stretching a little further, first 1 mile, then another. And when the road got long enough, the workers in their machines started building an overpass. The road curving over trusses, rising into the air, a good road, a great road. But then, before lines could even be painted, before the overpass connected, they left. Gone were the builders, the machines, the promises. Road unfinished, the overpass an open question mark, a road in the sky. A road in the sky that went nowhere. It scares me a little, this road in the sky. Like maybe one day I'll make a wrong turn and I won't notice the signs, and I'll drive right off that overpass. It's not so much the impact that scares me, but the 0.2 seconds past the ledge where gravity grabs and you know it's already too late, there's nothing you can do. You can clutch the wheel or you can scramble over the seats and you can say your prayers. But no matter what, you're going to die because gravity will gobble you up until you crash and burn, and the long knowledge of that has got to be more painful than the moment you're instantly dead. Sometimes, when I look at Beth, I see something in her smile, like a wrinkle or a wave, a wavering smile. We don't talk much these days. How are you? I'm fine. There's no tingle anymore when we touch. I find her staring out the window, just staring. And there are more and more days when her ring finger's naked, and I can't say exactly what's different, but she doesn't kiss me the way she used to kiss me. When I think about Beth, I imagine she's in the car with me on that road to nowhere. And as our car is speeding along, zipping toward that overpass, we see the signs. We see all the signs. Caution, road closed, danger. And I see the signs on that road to nowhere, but one glance at Beth. And for some reason, I just can't push brakes.
Good readers tonight, my goodness. Ann Stark, followed by Caitlin Derrickson and Marianne Witterberg.
I'd like to read for you the first few pages of my novel that has the working title Backstage. It's a story of two women. One's 22, her name's Jessie. The other is 35. It's a clash of cultures. Jessie's from a middle-class neighborhood in Walnut Creek, California. And the other woman is part of a bohemian group of artists, theater people in Berkeley from all over the country. Their paths come together. The group of theater people, however, some of them are involved in some very bad things, including child trafficking. This novel has a prologue, and I'll start with that and then a little bit of chapter 1. The air was damp and stale with the ever-present Bay Area marine smell. She was cold, but the chill in her bones was now a permanent condition. Watching the long-limbed man charge toward her, she recalled the pulsating eyes of the possum that she scared up in her grandfather's garage in Little Rock. Along with her memory of the terrified glare, there was the same stink of terror emanating from his body as he came nearer. The toddler, leaning against the car's metal surface, swayed slightly back from the sound of a familiar voice approaching. The milkiness of the little boy's breath wafted in her face before he turned his head toward the low-pitched yell. In less than an instant, the man engulfed the small body in his brown muscular arms just as the driver of the car yanked the transmission into gear and simultaneously pressed the tires into motion. Profane street Spanish forced its way through the gap in the power-up window, over which she had no control. The nasty words for prostitute threatened to find meaning in her brain, but in that fogginess, they couldn't take hold. She could only feel her own mouth form the familiar name that in her panic she screamed aloud, Raul. Chapter 1, Jessie. The Repertory Theater in Berkeley was an Art Deco building, its entry floored in hexagons of celadon and black tile, and its copper doors centered with etched beveled glass. It shared a marble wall with a bank on one side and a secondhand record store topped with a tattoo parlor on the other. Jessie vaguely remembered the music store, having once been a lingerie shop. As she stepped under the rope crystal of the giant chandelier in the foyer, Jessie felt the push of the crowd and strangely the sting of her own loneliness there. Most of the theater goers were well dressed, flanked with shiny heels, both men and women. Pausing under the chandelier, she watched the lights of the atrium flicker in the moist, thick air. She entered the auditorium and proceeded toward the orchestra. Settling into her seat and shuddering from a drowsiness of exhaustion, not serenity, she felt a soft hand against the shoulder of the coat she was attempting to ease out of and place against her seat. "Can I help you with that?" came a voice from behind, disturbing her daydreams. The voice was rich and full. Jessie turned her head sideways, but caught only a hazy view of the man in her peripheral vision. She nodded, and his soft fingers grazed her shoulders as he helped her place the white coat on the back of the velvet seat. Courtesy prevented Jessie from catching another glimpse of the man behind her. Her visual record of the man recalled an expensive suit, maybe even a tux, coffee skin, thick, wiry hair, slicked back as if windblown, its streaks of gray glistening in the house lights. She lowered her head to take in a quick view of her immediate neighbors. No one seemed interested in the solitary females seated amongst theater goers smack in the middle of the orchestra section. The heavy-scented woman on her left was whispering in a feverish conversation. The man on her right was hogging the armrest. Except for one seat next to, behind her right shoulder, all the seats around her were filled. No surprise since the play was sold out. What did surprise her was that she seemed to be the only white person in the section. Not that that bothered her. Many of the people around her were older, not quite her parents' age, but almost. As minutes passed toward opening curtains, no usher or angry patron appeared to challenge her ticket. Pulling her dark hair out from behind her shoulders, she sank back into the coat that was pushed against the plush velvet. She tugged the hem of her dress over her thighs. Her dress was sleeveless and short. Kurt had given it to her for her last birthday, her 22nd, and this was the first time she'd worn it. She hadn't dressed up since the beginning of her first pregnancy, almost 2.5 years ago. In the days before her miscarriage, she remembered enjoying the attention she got wearing sexy clothes. She was toned then from her mountain biking regimen. Now her muscles were gone and she didn't have an appetite. She was skinny and gangly, her pale legs once trimmed stuck like sticks from the hem of the black satin. Her hand released a clutch of papers onto her lap. After she refolded the crumpled ticket and stuffed it in her purse, she opened the program, pretending to read it in the darkening haze. The jewel colors from the curtains and swags combined with the artificially heated air made her slightly woozy. The walls released their lacquer smell combined with the body aromas that were accumulating in the theater for decades. Her thoughts returned to the week before, the Friday when she went out on an outing with Max for the first time on her own in months. The morning was perfect in the 80s, a rare warm September day in the Bay Area, and Kurt had taken his bike to work. Afraid that some last-minute nerves would ruin her plans, She left the makings of their breakfast and Kurt's lunch on the counter, knives smeared with mayonnaise, dirty plates in the sink, crusted with eggs and syrup. She loaded Max into the back seat of the Subaru, fastened him securely into his car seat, and headed east to Oakland Zoo. All along the drive, Max mumbled his new words, especially his favorite, "What's it?" She tried to answer each and every inquiry with the truthful answer. "That's a Western Larch, Max. That's an Oakland City police car. That's a picture of Celine Dion. She's a famous singer." She loved Max so much, but her heart was heavy. There should be 2 children in this car, she thought. I shouldn't have been riding that bike. I shouldn't have been working out so much. Then I'd have my little girl too, and we'd be a family we were supposed to be. But why am I taking this out on the people I love the most? Inside the zoo enclosure, she fixed the Velcro cuff to the chubby wrist of her son and then fastened the other end to her own arm while a bright yellow telephone cord stretched between them, and together they explored the zoo's wondrous menagerie. "We are Tweedledum and Tweedledee," she told Max, tickling his stomach. Linked together, they visited the lather-necked giraffes, the lumbering camels, and Max's favorite, the otters, his playful friends. Spreading out a blanket, she let Max dance around her in a circle on the spacious lawn, taking off his cup for just a moment as she reclined in the humid sunshine. The 2 of them had watched the ground squirrels play in the oak trees while carefully listening for rattlesnakes. They devoured egg salad sandwiches while Jesse answered Max's queries, while his pudgy fingers combed the grass. "What's it?" he asked. "A red ant." "Don't touch it, it bites." "What's it?" "Those are dandelion seeds. Blow like this." "What's it?" "No, Max, that's trash. Don't touch." "Time for your superhero juice," she said, handing him the tube of antibacterial cream with which she doused him several times a day. Now she was sitting in a velvet seat in an overheated theater waiting for a play that her brother was in once in New York. Her body being here, but not really being here. She was not supposed to be here. Seat 15 in row G. She valiantly tried not to think about the reasoning that caused her to use the ticket she found in the coat, her husband encouraging her to go to the play after she told him about her brother. But already she missed Max. He was her life, so why did she let Kurt talk her into this? Of course, the reason was currently resting on her shoulders. On the way home from the zoo, she stopped at Out of the Closet on University Avenue and pulled Max through the racks while she loaded her free arm with a few items of clothing, a pair of men's overalls, a baby denim jacket, and a white leather coat. In the dressing room, with Max fumbling at her feet with his blanket and wrist harness, she put on the coat. The thigh-length coat had a high-end label and appeared intact without flaws or stains. She tied the belt as she checked herself critically in front of the dressing room mirror. The pregnancy fat was totally gone, but there were deep hollows in her cheeks which the noon sun had highlighted. Despite all that, the coat looked good on her and she wanted it. She stuck her hands deeply into the pockets and found a wad of papers, a receipt, a computer printout, and an unopened pack of tissues which she quickly stuffed into the outside pocket of Max's diaper bag. Then she rethought and opened one of the sheets of papers, finding a receipt for the coat itself, which said the store had paid $20 for the coat several weeks earlier. Jessie gasped at the current price tag, $32. She realized that if new, the coat was worth at least a couple $100s. She opened another folded piece of paper. The computer printout had a barcode for the ticket for a play called Unholy Vows. The date on the ticket was the following Tuesday. She gathered up the coat, stuffed the papers back in the pocket, and took the bundle up to the counter. She handed the clerk the 220s left in her wallet, all that she had to spend till the end of the month. When she drove into the parking lot of their apartment, feeling some guilt for buying the coat, she also felt a pang of sadness for the enormous old larch that was girded in orange for demolition. The imminent loss of that tree weighed heavily on the residents of the university housing complex where she lived. Trekking up the creaky second-story stairs with Max in her arms, she wondered whether the tree would survive the weekend. At the door of the apartment, though, her arms laden with shopping bags and a sleeping Max, Kurt met her with a big hug. All bad thoughts disappeared when she modeled the coat for her husband. He had a strange, longing look in his eyes. Their lovemaking that night was unusually tender, Kurt caressing her concave belly and letting her know how much he loved her body. When they were lying side by side, however, she was left with a host of unspoken questions. Some of those questions were weighty and large, such as the health of their marriage. Others were small and seemingly inconsequential, such as who was the owner of that coat, and did she know that she had lost the ticket?
So like Brian said, I'm going to read some of my fiction. It is a microfiction. I debated doing my short story, but then that would be like spoilers for my classmates, and that would suck, so microfiction. I'm just looking out for you guys. Okay, I realize it doesn't have a title, so this is not titled. Okay. Every time the restaurant door creaks open, I turn and squint at the shadows filling the frame. They shake rain out of coat collars and umbrellas before striding past the threshold. It's usually women in swishy skirts and shiny heels, trailed by men in suit jackets. I want it to be him. But the door keeps creaking and skirts swish past my table, and ice clinks in glass. The gilded clock above the top door ticks. It weighs heavy on my liver. Any sign of him? The waitress's pity echoes like the rain streaming outside. She feels sorry for the poor girl sitting alone in a fancy restaurant on a Friday night. Glasses chink all around. Somewhere champagne corks pop. I wait, foot jiggling in its patent heel. My hair swings every time the door creaks. He asked me to meet him at this restaurant where the napkins are cloth and the silverware is real. We've only ever gone to a Chinese place before. He wants to talk about the book, he says, but underneath my dress my bra and panties match. We're writers. Subtext matters. He said 7:30. He's just running late. The clock reads 7:37. 7 minutes is an acceptable amount of late. I'll start to worry at 7:40. At 7:45, I begin to wonder if he's told his wife that he's meeting me to talk about the book. I don't know if she'd ever actually believe that, especially not the way she looked at me last week when I talked to him for too long and she stretched her limbs like a cat and tucked him away. She jammed her hand into his back pocket as they walked to the door. I rub my thumb along the glass of my phone like I'm smoothing out paper. I double-check the time. The text says 7:30. He didn't say he'd be late. He usually isn't, but in the rare case he is, he usually texts. He's reliable like that. At 8, the waitress stands at my table, hands furrowed into her hips. Her sympathy fades like soft violins. She wants a better tip than a sad 20-something can provide. She wants me gone. I order bruschetta, and she applies so much pressure to her menu pad that I suspect every table after me will have also ordered bruschetta. I wait. The bruschetta comes. I still wait. I order wine, too, white, good with chicken or fish, whatever he'd prefer when he comes. The alcohol echoes in my stomach and steams the spread almost instantly. I haven't eaten anything today but crusty bread and tomatoes drizzled in olive oil. By 8:30, the rain stopped. The bruschetta's crumbs. The door, once again, creaks open. I recognize his stance. I leap out of my seat, heart rammed into my ribcage like an anvil, and I see him softly grasp the back of the woman who just walked in behind him. His wife. They walk past as I crash against the booth back and immediately look down. The wine nearly tips all the way over. He doesn't even look at me. On my phone, a text message vibrates blue, and then I see, "We're here, sweetie." The hostess seats them next to the bowed-out bay window. He doesn't face me. He doesn't even know I'm here. His wife catches my gaze as I clutter to a stand and stumble to the door. Smirk. It's the last thing I hear before I let the door creak behind me. Thank you.
Mine is also microfiction, and it sort of has a title, but I'm probably going to change it. So right now it's called Have You Burned This in Shape? You don't remember the first time Bryn told you you only live once, but you imagine it must have been the Friday night, 3 weeks after you met your new roommates. Bryn and Sandra sat cross-legged on the floor in the front room. They said the carpet was more comfortable than the sofa you purchased on Craigslist before the 3 of you moved into your 2-bedroom apartment. You sat on the sofa. Hey, I have an idea, Bryn said, slipping her hand underneath the cover of her Chemistry 101 textbook and slamming it shut. Let's go toilet paper the boys' dorms. You can't toilet paper an entire residence hall, he said. But what you really meant was, what if we get caught? Sandra disappeared into the room she shared with Bryn and returned with 2 mega-packs of Angel Soft. The finest Walmart offers, she said. You turned to page 117 and pretended to be interested in chemical bonds. Come on, Bryn said. You only live once. You toilet papered the boys' dorms in a random house on your way home. You may not remember the first time, but every time Brent has uttered the words, "You only live once, your life has changed." These words are the reason you jumped 20 feet from that closed-off bridge into the Fall River last summer. The reason you have a butterfly tattoo on the small of your back and a C- in all civilizations. The reason you know what 120 miles per hour on the freeway feels like at midnight with the windows down and One Republic's Good Life blasting on the stereo. These words and Brent. You're waiting for Brent and Sandra now. You came home early from Thanksgiving break to work on a term paper, but now you have 10 pages on Hamlet and no one to stop you from reaching 15. You listen for Brent's too loud laughter, but all you hear is the click of a doorknob and one pair of feet on the stairs. A spring in the sofa cushion jabs your thigh as you shift your position to face the stairwell. Sandra's face is stark against her colored hair. She sits beside you on the sofa, puts her trembling hands between the gaudy floral pattern and her knees. She mumbles something unintelligible. What, you say? What's wrong? She leans forward and fixes her eyes on the spot on the carpet where Brent spilled her crimson nail polish last week. You see Sandra's lips form 3 syllables, but you don't hear them. Instead, you hear, "You only live once."
Our final 2 readers of the evening are Katrina Meerbrook and Benjamin Wright.
Okay, I'm new and inexperienced, so be forgiven. I don't know what it is, I'm just going to read it. Sitting in the back seat of my mom's tan Chevy, I propped myself up with my left hand to see out the window. I looked as we drove. I looked and listened. I looked at the houses we passed every day if I had never seen them before. I studied the men mowing their lawns with their shirts off in the dry heat. My pink sandals couldn't reach the car floor, not yet. My older sister sat in the front seat. She looked like she belonged in that front seat with my mom sipping Diet Cokes. I always listened and they thought I didn't because sometimes they talked about me. But today they were talking about her, so I let my eyes glaze over and I picked out the words in between the radio and the breathless hum of the car. When my mother did math in her head or talked about her, she tapped her pointer finger on the steering wheel, keeping no rhythm, just taps when it took too long to calculate or when she chewed on her words too much. I saw her tap and then I strained to listen. Dad had a test, but his professor wouldn't let him miss it for the funeral. We started later than we wanted to. Tap, tap. I asked my dad about this a couple years later. I was bothered because he wasn't mad at the professor. He told me what happened like he was reading the weather report. My sister took a sip of her soda and said she remembered when my mom would cry and my dad would stay quiet. Another couple of taps dully echoed through the car. We gave away her clothes. We didn't know where to put them, and we couldn't keep them, couldn't throw them away. My sister asked more questions, and my mother's ambiguity met with her honesty to answer the best she could. I kept listening for taps out the and looking out the window with my chin resting on the leather surface. Crossing my now long legs Indian style, I sat on my mom's bed as yearbooks, pictures, awards, and report cards spewed across the bedspread. Could your hair have gotten any bigger? I laughed even though I was nervous. My bag sat waiting across the hall in my soon-to-be old bedroom. California was waiting, and soon everything I owned would be packed into that tan Chevy. I held a stack of pictures of my mom and my dad on young birthdays, pictures of my grandmother with hair deep brown and smooth fingal finger. I flipped to the next one. The casket was blue, holding her in pillows and a baby blanket. She had a lace dress. Her lips were so small, and I remember thinking I'd never seen lips so small. That's her. I flung the photograph across the bed, but it didn't disappear into the memorabilia like I wanted it to. She stayed in the picture and she didn't move. My mom didn't say anything, she just sat next to me. I'd never seen her before. The next morning I drove, I said goodbye and I crossed state lines and I tried to listen through the radio and the breathless hum of the car as I tapped an irregular rhythm on the steering wheel.
I'm also a first timer, so. I want to give a big shout out. I wanted to shout at all of us, a big holler to the path, and give it back to the trees in a wallop of sound. Shouting out to erasers that haven't dried out yet,
and to soup that's still warm though I'm late coming home. I never want to find us broken, find us torn, find us stuck on a lost road where the moonlight gets bent, find us seeping through cracks in the dirt that's tightly drying up the underbelly of who we've become. Find our fingers interlocked with a black beak, pecking and pecking and pecking at our palms that can't seem to feel when the time has come to find us. I want to find us. I want to find us at the edge of the base of our mountains, where the wheat isn't melting and up we go into the coolness of it all. Swimming over ourselves, getting drawn through the back streets of life where we gallivant on up, through the sides of a ship, sailing out into the grass where our eyes first checked, and locked, and gave it all up. We gave it all up. Gave it all up to the swarming rebellion of who we've become and what we've desired, lusting for the time when it all would reverse, and gave it all back to the dusty re-entrance, sanctuaries that held our ankles to the wall so that when we stood we wouldn't tumble, rolling on over the surface of glass that we've carved for ourselves, reflections of the back of our necks and the roof of our knees. There was a boy once, a boy who swam like a bird and ran through the air. He snuck down the stairs to see where we kept the gold. This boy understood what it meant to be vital. Vitalized under the victory of his vicariousness, we lived through him. Through the boy at the edge of the staircase, we idolized his intricacies and inducted his infinity into our inferno. And here we stand, standing at the edge of it all with the boy in our chest that can't seem to burst from the smiling, shouting, craving lunacy of his own ineptitude. And so that's where we start, and we give it all up. When we want to dance, we find it all prancing about on the tables and door frames. When we want to sing, we'll find ourselves slipping into the eyes of each other. When we want to live, let's do it at once with each other, living and lasting and loving like nobody never lived, holding tight to our string and tugging us up, wrapping around the arms of our flight and giving it all up, to you and to us. This life is what we've come to give, and we do. So here comes a shout out to giving it up, and up we can go, up to the earth where we've longed to be living, up to the ones that we've longed to be loving, and up to the sky where we've all gone a-sailing, giving it up to the life that we gave. To you, to me, to us, to him, to Shakespeare, to remembrance, to doors, to windows, to birds' tails, to waves, to the grain of a beam, to the talking we talk, to the laughing, to the romping, to the raving and ranting, to the leaping, to the ends of the four corners, we've gave it all up. And this shout-out gives us what we've wanted to win since whenever we went to the point where we've come, which is now, which is here, which is this that surrounds us. Us, you and I, we've come up to now, and here's where we stand to dance. Shouting out to the continuity of our dance that gives it all up to the now that we've reached through flying on up through the wind and the dust of our boats that stay harbored, though we've longed to set free the birds that hold down the tunnels that curve. We've had it all. We get it all. Me and you, babe. Our page is empty so far. Let's dance.
Thank you for coming, everyone. Helicon is on the second and fourth Wednesdays, am I correct? Thursdays, sorry, on our writer's night, there we go. Second and fourth Thursdays, so it'll be the second Thursday in October, where I believe it's the National Federation of the Blind that's rating featured guests. Is that right, Erin?
Yeah.
Awesome. Please, go ahead.
Yeah.
That's it.
As you go, please help put your chairs away. Thank you.
And buy Eric's book.